She was supposed to be a bride. She was supposed to be walking toward the man she loved in the dress she had chosen. With flowers in her hair and 280 people watching her become someone's forever. Instead, Celeste, a brilliant black woman who had built everything with her own hands, was running, barefoot, down a hotel corridor, dress trailing behind her, tears destroying the makeup that had taken 2 hours to perfect, running from the room where, 40 minutes before the ceremony, she had heard the voice of her fiancé and the laugh of her best friend. 11 years of friendship, 2 years of love, gone in the space of an open door. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she couldn't stay. And then she opened a door that was not hers and came face to face with him. Kang Ji-ho, known in the shadows of 3 continents as a Korean mafia boss who owned the very hotel she was falling apart in, a man with dragon tattoos climbing his neck, a glass of whiskey in his hand, and the kind of stillness that tells you, without a single word, that he has never once in his life been afraid of anything in this room. He looked at the dress, the bare feet, the tears, the ring still on her finger. And instead of letting her leave, he locked the door. What happened inside that suite, and what happened 3 weeks later when she walked back into his world? This Time by Choice is a story about the wrong room that turned out to be exactly the right place, about a woman who lost everything false and found something real in the most dangerous place imaginable. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. She had not cried in the elevator. She had not cried in the stairwell or in the hallway of the 14th floor where she had walked in the wrong direction. For 3 full minutes before realizing she did not know where she was going. She had not cried when she passed a housekeeping cart and the woman pushing it looked at her, at the dress, at the veil, at the bare feet with an expression of such complete and silent understanding that it almost broke something open inside her chest. She had not cried. And then she opened a door that was not hers, stepped into a room that was not hers. And something about the smell of it, cedar and cold air and whiskey, and the particular silence of a space that belonged entirely to someone else, undid her completely. The sound that came out of her was not elegant. It was not the kind of crying that looks beautiful in movies, where a single tear travels a perfect line down a perfect cheek. It was the kind of crying that comes from somewhere below language, below thought, below the version of yourself that knows how to hold it together in front of strangers. Her shoulders folded inward. Her hand was still on the door handle. The white dress pulled around her feet on the carpet like something that had given up. She did not, in that moment, see him. He saw her. Kang Ji-ho had been standing at the window for the better part of an hour, not looking at Manhattan so much as using it, the city's indifferent geometry. Its 10,000 lit windows, its complete lack of interest in any single human life, as a kind of anchor. The meeting scheduled for that evening was the kind that required stillness. He had learned over 20 years of navigating rooms where the wrong word ended, careers and occasionally lives, that stillness was not passivity. It was preparation. It was the particular discipline of making yourself unreadable before you needed to read everyone else. He was not prepared for this. She was somewhere between 25 and 30. She was wearing what was unmistakably a wedding dress, off-shoulder, beaded at the bodice, the kind of dress that represented an enormous decision made months ago and now stood in devastating contrast to whatever had happened in the hours since. Her hair was coming undone. White flowers, pinned carefully by someone who loved her this morning, were sliding loose. Her feet were bare, her left hand, he noticed this the way he noticed everything, automatically, without choosing to, still carried a ring. She had not looked up yet. For a moment that lasted perhaps 4 seconds and felt considerably longer, Ji-ho simply watched her. Not with calculation. Not with a particular professional assessment he applied to every person who entered a room he occupied. With something quieter than that. Something that did not have a name in any of the 3 languages he thought influently. Then she looked up. The sound she made was not a scream. It was the sharp intake of breath that precedes one, the moment before the body decides whether to fight or dissolve. She stepped backward. Her hand found the door handle again. He did not move. He was aware that he was the most frightening possible version of this scenario. A large, unknown man in an expensive room with a locked door and no explanation. He was aware that every rational instinct she had was currently cataloging exits. He was also aware, and this was the part he could not account for, the variable that did not fit any model he had built for himself, that he did not want her to leave. Not because of anything she was, because of everything she was carrying. He had sat across from men who had ordered deaths and smiled while doing it. He had negotiated in rooms where the air itself felt like a held breath. He had learned to read the specific texture of human desperation, the way it changed a person's posture, the way it aged a face in real time. What he was reading in her was not desperation. It was the precise, devastating aftermath of a trust that had been broken so completely that the person carrying it had not yet understood the full dimensions of the damage. He knew that feeling. He had just never seen it, wearing a wedding dress. He walked to the door. He turned the lock. And he said the only true thing he had said to anyone in a very long time. She did not run. That was the thing that surprised her most in the hours that came after. Not what he said, not the locked door, not the fact that she stayed. What surprised her was the absence of the instinct to flee. She was a woman alone in a room with a stranger who had just removed her only exit, and her body, which had been making every decision for the last 40 minutes without consulting her mind at all, simply stopped. It stood still. He had moved away from the door the moment he locked it, not toward her, but laterally, in the direction of the sitting area, putting the full width of the room between them with a deliberateness that she recognized, even then, as intentional. He was not cornering her, he was demonstrating something. The geometry of his movement said, "I know what this looks like, and I want you to see that it is not that." She stayed near the door anyway. Old instincts do not dissolve because someone moves politely to the other side of a room. He set his glass down on the coffee table and looked at her with those dark, unreadable eyes, not blank, she would realize later. Never blank, but controlled in a way that most people's faces simply were not, and said nothing. For long enough that the silence stopped feeling like threat and started feeling like patience. "You're safe here." 3 words, flat. Declarative. Not soft, not performative, not the reassuring tone that men use when they want a frightened woman to stop being frightened because her fear is inconvenient. Just information, delivered the way he might read coordinates off a map. She almost laughed. "You just locked the door. There are people in this corridor who cannot see you leave this room right now." She stared at him. "That is supposed to make me feel better." "No. It's supposed to be true." There was a difference, and something in her, the part that had spent the last decade in rooms full of clients who said what they thought she wanted to hear, and a relationship full of the same, registered it immediately and did not know what to do with it. She did not sit down, but she let go of the door handle. The water was on the table. She did not remember him placing it there. It was simply present, a small, practical gesture that asked nothing of her and expected nothing in return. She did not drink it. She looked at it for a long time. "The wedding is downstairs," she said. Not to him, exactly. To the room. To the particular cruelty of the situation's geography, that somewhere 18 floors below, 280 people were sitting in chairs with programs in their laps, waiting for music that was playing for no one. He did not say, "I'm sorry." He did not say, "What happened?" He did not say any of the things that people say when they are performing the role of comfort without actually knowing how to provide it. He sat down, he picked up his glass, he waited. And that the absolute absence of pressure was what opened her. She did not mean to speak. The words simply exceeded their container. 2 years of it. She told the room the careful architecture of a relationship that she had believed in the way she believed in load-bearing walls. Because the math held, because everything visible confirmed the structure, because nothing had ever cracked in a way she could see. She had designed their apartment together. She had turned down a project in Tokyo because she did not want to be apart from him for 6 months. She had stood in the bridal salon with her mother and tried on 12 dresses, and chosen this one because when she described it to him over the phone, he had said, "Send me a picture so I can imagine you walking toward me." He had been very good at saying the right things. The dama de Hanra had been her friend since the first week of college. The kind of friendship that had its own history, its own language, its own archive of shared crisis and shared joy spanning 11 years, the kind of friendship that you do not audit because it has never given you reason to. The door had been opened 2 inches. She had heard his voice first. Then a laugh she knew better than her own. Ji-ho listened to all of it without moving. His face did not perform sympathy. His eyes did not do the thing that people's eyes do when they are waiting for a pause so they can insert themselves into your suffering. He simply received it, the whole, shapeless, raw, still bleeding thing, with a quality of attention that felt absurdly like respect. When she finished, the room was quiet for a moment. "You're still wearing the ring," he said. She looked at her left hand. The diamond caught the light from the window and threw a small, bright fragment across the wall. She pulled it off. She set it on the table next to the water glass. The gesture cost her something. She felt the cost of it move through her like a current. Not grief, exactly, but the particular weight of a door closing on a version of yourself that you had believed in completely. Then she looked at him directly for the first time. "Why did you lock the door?" He looked back at her for a moment before answering. In the window behind him, Manhattan continued its complete indifference to both of them. "Because 3 men in this corridor are here to confirm whether I arrived alone tonight. If you walked out in a wedding dress in the state you were in, that question would have an interesting answer. And you protecting your interests means I'm trapped here. It means you're invisible." He paused. "For tonight, invisible is safer than visible." She sat down, not because she had decided to trust him, because she was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with her feet. And because the room was quiet, and because the man across from her had not once asked her to be anything other than exactly what she was, broken, barefoot, and entirely without a plan. Then his phone vibrated. He looked at it. And for the first time, something moved behind his eyes, something colder and more practiced than anything she had seen in him in the last 20 minutes. "I need 30 minutes, he said, standing. "For what?" "For something that is not your concern." He walked to the inner door, paused with his hand on the frame. "Do not open the main door. Do not answer if someone knocks." He said it without turning around. "You are not here." And then he was gone, and she was alone with the ring on the table and the city in the window and the slow dawning awareness that she had just told the most private devastation of her life to a man whose name she did not yet know. The tablet was not hers to look at. She knew that. She had not touched it, had not moved from the chair where she had finally fully sat down, the dress spreading around her in a circle of white silk that felt increasingly absurd against the muted luxury of the room. She had sat with her hands in her lap and her eyes on the window and the ring on the table between them, like a small declarative punctuation mark at the end of a sentence she had spent 2 years writing. She had not touched anything. But the tablet was on the desk to her left. And when the screen illuminated automatic, unprompted, the way screens do when a notification arrives, she did not look away in time. She was not meant to read it. She read it. 4 words and a category designation. White text on a dark background, visible for perhaps 3 seconds before the screen dimmed again. Kang Ji-ho, Interpol watch list category A. The room did not change. The city in the window did not change. The ring on the table did not move. Everything was exactly as it had been for the last 20 minutes. And yet the entire architecture of the situation, the water glass placed with quiet consideration, the lateral movement away from the door, the quality of attention that had felt so disarmingly like respect, rearranged itself around those 4 words into something with completely different dimensions. She stood up, not quickly. The particular discipline she had built over years of walking into rooms where she was underestimated, of presenting work to clients who had already decided what they thought before she opened her mouth, of holding herself together in circumstances that wanted her unraveled. That discipline moved through her now and held her upright, and kept her breathing at a pace that did not betray the thing happening in her chest. She looked at the inner door. She looked at the main door. She thought about the 3 men in the corridor that he had mentioned casually, as though men whose presence required a woman to remain invisible were an unremarkable feature of an ordinary evening. She thought about the word invisible and what it had cost her nothing to accept 30 minutes ago, and what it would cost her now to disbelieve it. She was still standing when the inner door opened. He came through it without hurry, the way he did everything, with an economy of movement that she was beginning to understand was not laziness, but control. The deliberate conservation of energy by someone who had learned that urgency was a liability. He had his phone in one hand, his jacket was still perfectly in place. Whatever had happened in that room had not touched his surface. He looked at her standing. He looked at the tablet on the desk. The screen was dark. But he was, she understood now, a man who noticed the angle of things, the position of objects, the shift in a person's posture, the 2 inches of difference between someone sitting and someone who has just stood up in response to information. He understood immediately. The silence that followed was different from the silences that had come before. Those had been patient, this one had wait. "Now you want to leave," he said. It was not an accusation. It was not defensive. It was the flat acknowledgement of a logical sequence, cause, effect, outcome, delivered in the same tone he might use to confirm a meeting time. "Now I need to leave," she said. The distinction mattered to her. She was not sure why she needed him to hear it. He walked to the main door. He turned the lock. He opened it. The corridor beyond was empty. Whatever had been out there before was gone now, the carpet stretching in both directions under warm light. Silent and unremarkable, the ordinary hallway of an expensive hotel that had no memory of anything. "The elevator is to the left," he said. She crossed the room. She was 3 feet from the door when she stopped. She stopped because of the table. The ring was still there, of course it was. She had not touched it. She was leaving it. She had decided that the moment she put it down and felt the decision move through her like a current, she was not going back for the ring. But next to the ring, there was something that had not been there before, a card. The hotel's own stationery, cream-colored, the property's name embossed at the top in small gold letters. And on it, in handwriting that was precise and unexpectedly unhurried for a man who was watching her walk out of his room, a phone number, nothing else, no name, no instruction, no explanation. She did not remember him writing it. She stared at it for a long moment. "In case you need somewhere to stay tonight," he said, from behind her. He was not close. He had remained at the exact distance he had maintained since she arrived, as though proximity itself was something he was being careful about. "The hotel has other floors." She picked up the card. She did not look at him. She walked out. The door closed behind her with the soft, definitive sound of a well-made thing returning to its resting place. And she stood in the corridor with the card in her hand and the city somewhere below her, and the wedding still technically happening 18 floors down, and she breathed in, out, in. The elevator was to the left. She walked toward it, and inside the clean mirrored box of it, on the way down to a floor she had not yet decided. She looked at the card, at the number, at the handwriting that had not rushed itself despite every reason to. She had spent 11 years trusting a friendship that had been lying to her. 2 years trusting a love that had been performing itself. She had a talent, she was beginning to understand, for believing in structures that looked solid from the outside and had nothing behind the wall. And yet, there was a difference. She could feel it even now. Even through the rational alarm that was correctly cataloging everything dangerous about the last hour between a person who constructs a false surface and a person who simply does not show you the real one, between deception and privacy, between a lie and a closed door. He had not lied to her. He had not told her the truth, either. But he had placed water on a table without asking her to be grateful for it. He had listened to the worst hour of her life without turning it into a moment about himself. He had opened the door when she needed to leave, without argument, without condition, without the particular cruelty of making her ask twice. She did not know who he was. She knew, with the specific precision of someone who had built a career on reading structures, understanding which walls were decorative and which ones held the weight, that she had not been in danger in that room. She had been, in some way she could not yet name, held. The elevator reached her floor. The doors opened, she stepped out into the corridor and stood for a moment with the card still in her hand. And somewhere in the lower geography of the hotel, 280 people were waiting for a ceremony that was not coming. And her phone was in a bridal suite she did not want to return to port, and the man whose name she now knew was sitting 18 floors above her in a room she had entered by accident, with a glass of whiskey and a ring on a table that she had left behind like a period at the end of a sentence. She turned the card over. On the back, in the same unhurried handwriting, a single additional word that she had not seen when she picked it up. Tomorrow. Just that. No question mark. No elaboration. The quiet confidence of someone who did not make requests, who made, instead, the kind of statement that left the decision entirely with the other person, without pressure, without performance, without the need to fill silence with reassurance. She closed her hand around the card, and for the first time since she had heard two voices through an open door and understood, in an instant, that the life she believed in had been fiction, for the first time since the whole constructed architecture of her present had come down around her without warning, Celeste Monroe felt something shift inside her chest that was not grief. It was small, it was quiet, it was nowhere near hope, but it was facing forward. 3 weeks is not a long time. It is long enough to return a ring by post without a letter. Long enough to sleep in your mother's guest room and wake up every morning to the smell of coffee and the particular kindness of a woman who knows when her daughter needs to be fed and when she needs to be left alone. Long enough to go back to the office, to sit at the drafting table, to open the software and begin again the patient. Exacting work of imagining spaces that do not yet exist, of looking at emptiness and deciding what it could hold. 3 weeks is long enough to almost forget the weight of a card in your hand. Almost Celeste had not called the number. She had made that decision in the elevator and remade it every morning for 21 days with the consistency of someone who understood that some decisions require daily recommitment to remain decisions at all. She had put the card in the inside pocket of her coat, not thrown away, not displayed, simply present, the way a person keeps something they have not yet determined the meaning of. She had told herself it was caution. She was honest enough in the quietest hours to know it was also something else. The project brief arrived on a Tuesday. Her senior partner called her into his office with the particular energy of a man delivering news he believes will be received as a gift. And it was. The project was extraordinary. A full interior renovation of one of Manhattan's most prestigious luxury properties. Lobby, executive corridors, penthouse level, the kind of commission that arrived once in a firm's history and defined everything that came after. He wanted her to lead it. He said her name was specifically requested by the client. She asked which property. He told her. She sat with that information for the length of time it took to breathe in and breathe out. And then she said yes, because she was a professional, and because the work was real, and because she had spent 3 weeks rebuilding the architecture of herself, and she was not going to let a locked door on the 34th floor take anything else from her. She prepared for the meeting the way she prepared for everything that mattered, completely. She arrived 7 minutes early. She set her portfolio on the conference table with the quiet authority of someone who knew exactly what was inside it and exactly what it was worth. She had worn the black blazer, structured, precise, the one she wore when she needed the outside of herself to be unambiguous. When the door opened and he walked in, she did not look away. He was exactly as she remembered, and she had known he would be: the tegnu escudo, the open collar, the tattoos rising from beneath white fabric, the particular quality of his stillness that occupied a room without demanding it. He had two people with him. He acknowledged them without looking at them, the way people acknowledge furniture that has learned to walk. He looked at her, and in his eyes, those dark, calibrated eyes that she had spent 3 weeks telling herself she had misread, was the same thing she had seen in the suite. That unnamed something, present, unhurried, entirely aware of everything it was looking at. "Ms. Monroe," he said, "I've heard a great deal about your work." The meeting lasted 1 hour. She was the best person in the room, and they both knew it, and she presented with the precision and authority of someone who had earned every credential she carried, and he listened the way he had listened to her in the suite, with the complete, undivided attention of a man who did not perform interest, but simply had it. The others asked questions. He asked one. It was about light. Specifically about the relationship between natural light and the perception of safety in interior spaces, whether a room with more light actually felt safer, or whether safety was a function of something else entirely. Something that had less to do with visibility and more to do with the quality of attention in the room. It was, on its surface, an architectural question. It was not only an architectural question. She answered it directly, technically, and without acknowledging the second layer of it. Because she was a professional and the other people in the room were listening, but she held his gaze for precisely 1 beat longer than the question required. When the others left to get coffee, the room held them both in its sudden quiet. "You didn't call," he said. "No." Was that caution or a decision? She considered him across the table, this man who was on a list that existed because he had built something the world had officially decided to regard as a threat. Who had placed water on a table for a woman he did not know and asked nothing in return, who had written a single word on the back of a card and left the rest entirely to her. "I'm not sure there's a difference," she said. Something moved in his face. Not a smile, not quite. Something adjacent to it, the way his version of patience was adjacent to warmth without being reducible to it. "The 34th floor will need the most work," he said. "The light is wrong up there. It has been for years. I'll need full access. You'll have it." She closed her portfolio. She stood. She was at the door when she stopped, because this, she was beginning to understand, was something she did in rooms that contained him. She stopped at the door and turned back, and said the thing that was true. "You knew they would send me." He did not deny it. "I knew the firm's work," he said. "I knew who led it." That's not the same as answering the question. A pause. The particular pause of a man deciding, for the first time in a long time, to be precise, instead of protected. "No," he said. "It isn't." She stood with her hand on the doorframe and looked at him. Really looked the way she had looked at the card in the elevator. The way she looked at a space before she began to imagine what it could hold. She looked at the controlled surface of him, and at the thing underneath it that did not have a name in any language but was present, and had been present from the moment she walked through the wrong door. And she made the calculation that she had been making for 21 days in the guest room of her mother's house. She thought about structures, about walls that hold weight, and walls that only appear to, about the difference between a thing that is dangerous and a thing that is simply unknown, about the 11 years she had spent trusting a friendship that was performance, and the 2 years she had spent trusting a love that was architecture without foundation, and the 1 hour she had spent in a locked room with a stranger who had given her nothing false. "This project runs 8 months, she said. "I know, I don't compromise my work for personal reasons. I wouldn't ask you to, and you're on a list." "Category A," he said. He said it without apology and without theater, the way a person states a fact about themselves that they have long since made peace with, not proudly, not with shame, but with the particular acceptance of someone who has looked at the full truth of what they are and decided to remain standing anyway. She nodded. She left. In the corridor outside the conference room, she walked at her usual pace, measured, purposeful, the walk of a woman who knows where she is going. She did not slow down. She did not stop. But in the elevator, alone in the mirrored box of it, descending through the floors of a building she was about to spend 8 months transforming, she allowed herself one moment of complete honesty. She thought about a locked door, about how, in the moment he turned that lock, every instinct she had catalogued it as a closing, as a removal of choice, as the gesture of someone taking something from her. And how only later, in the long, quiet recalibration of 3 weeks, she had understood it differently. Not as a closing, as a boundary drawn around a space where something fragile could exist without being seen too soon. She had designed enough rooms to know the difference between a wall that imprisons and a wall that protects. She knew what a threshold was. She knew that some doors, when they lock, are not keeping you in. They are keeping everything else out. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened onto the marble expanse of the hotel's ground floor, the space she was about to reimagine, to rebuild from the inside out, to fill with light that did not lie about what it illuminated. Celeste Monroe stepped out. She did not look back. She did not need to. For the first time in a very long time, she was walking towards something rather than away from it, and the distinction, small and quiet and almost imperceptible from the outside, was the whole world. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever been so betrayed by someone you completely trusted? A friend? A partner? Someone you built your life around, that the pain didn't feel like heartbreak, but like the ground itself had disappeared beneath you? And in that moment of complete collapse, has a stranger ever seen you more clearly than the people who claimed to know you? Or maybe you've been the one judged before you even spoke, dismissed because of how you looked, where you came from, what category someone else decided to put you in, when all along, the truest thing about you was something no label could ever hold. Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about resilience, dangerous grace, and the love that finds you when you've stopped looking for it, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.